questions from the audience at this point? I have yes, Joe, go ahead, please. And microphone right behind you.
I'm Joe Fox from FX Consulting, and I have a question for Allie. Allie, you mentioned very briefly inductive charging in travel lanes and dynamic wireless recharging. That sounds very, very intriguing. Can you say a little bit more about what the Ray is doing and maybe about the state of that technology?
Oh man, I would love to. Can y'all hear me okay? Can you hear me? Okay, great. So the National Science Foundation, we heard a little bit about them yesterday and their impact on this institution, which is amazing, and on the state. But they have endowed a center in Utah. Formerly was the Select Center before the NSF invested, now Aspire, ASPIRE. They are in Logan, Utah, domiciled with University of Utah and actually Utah State University. I'm the current chair. I'm this year's chair of the Aspire Center. And what they have done, first of all, is they have helped to support the evolution of the technology to the point where they have loops embedded in about 2 inches deep in the roadway that can deliver up to 100 kW wirelessly. It's AC transfer. AC is the only energy type that will transfer over a magnetic field. So the roadbed initiates a magnetic field, and up to 100 kW has been proven, although the sweet spot's probably 60 kW for mixed fleet. The efficiencies are 87% to 94%, which is on the par with wired charging. So I'll just say it one more time, up to 94% efficiency of discharge and uptake by the vehicle at highway speeds. There are 3 projects that are moving to construction right now. The one that most everyone has heard about is Michigan DOT. Governor Whitmer has been very involved. They selected Electrion. I think it's a mile in the Detroit area. Electrion has done a number of projects. They're Europe-based. I want to say that they're Swedish. Also, Indiana DOT is working with a different company, Magment. Aspire is a advisor to that project. And then the Central Florida Expressway has a funded project nearing the end of planning now. Construction will begin in Q1 of 2023, and that is Aspire's project. The fourth coming to a roadway near you is Sandag. So San Diego's transportation agency will be working with Aspire on the 4th project. And what I want you to hear is that the technology has evolved. It has proven itself to be efficient in terms of the technology and the power transfer. Remains to be seen where in the ecosystem of charging electric roadways will fit in. And why does it remain to be seen? Because let's be honest, we don't have BEV trucks yet in the class 6 to 8 class of vehicles. So, you know, we got like, this is classic chicken and the egg, right? What's going to be the uptake of, you know, BEV heavy duty? We don't know, because we've got to get the trucks. And the, you know, Walmart has to test the trucks. So, you know, where this fits into the ecosystem remains to be seen. But it's really, really, really going to challenge the policy framework in this country. And this is the last thing I'll say. Well, first of all, you know, just think regionally, right? Michigan, Indiana, Florida, California. So this is not coming out of where you would expect. It didn't come out of crazy California, the left coast first, right? It came out of Michigan and Indiana and Florida, California. So there's a nice regional profile. But the other thing is that the federal code has prohibited commercial activity on the interstate system for 60 years. 23 USC 111 prevents all right-of-way of the interstate system from being commercialized. And if we want electric roadways, if we want charging lanes on the interstate system, we have got to change the code to allow for an ROI, because this is not something that can be built and operated for free.
So during the commissioner's remarks last night that many of you heard. I had listed a bunch of questions for today's panel, and you answered all my questions last night, but which is great. And Allie has added to that. But there was another one that has come up was as we move to accelerate innovations and acceptance of those, how do we get public support for that? How do we move so that the public is supportive of accelerating innovations and maybe becoming less, risk adverse? Commissioner, if you want to start.
So we have to do a better job of telling the story of what we all do each and every day. And the public takes our transportation system in particular for granted. It's only when things go wrong, when we have to downpost that bridge, or we have, a storm like the one last night that washes out a section of highway, that people actually stop and think about the role that transportation plays in their daily lives. And so until they understand the value of the work that we do and the infrastructure that they rely on, they're not going to appreciate why we need to innovate and why we have to do business differently. And so, I wish that we could have more publicity around the successful projects that we complete. There's a lot of focus right now on electric vehicles, on connected and automated vehicles, and how technology is going to transform the way that people move. But I think we've done ourselves a disservice not talking about how you move today. And a lot of the thoughts and concerns that people have around the future and their hesitancy to embrace new modes of transportation are going to slow down deployment. And as Allie so, clearly articulated today, we don't have time to waste because of the impact of transportation on our environment. We need to move quicker when it comes to deploying technology in every aspect of the work that we do, from the construction materials to how we operate and provide our transportation services. And so I think we as an industry need to discuss how we can energize the public. And it's come up many times, without financial resources, we cannot be successful. And the public doesn't want to pay for things unless they understand where their dollars are going, and we can demonstrate that we're being as efficient as possible with the financial resources that we're given. So talking about the needed investment has to be an aspect of this storytelling, because the numbers are staggering when we look at what it's going to take to bring our current systems up to a state of good repair. But there is so much potential if we think outside the box in terms of how we can generate revenue in the future, and being more open-minded to how we deliver these services and how we charge for use of the system, so that we can come up with a more sustainable revenue system is something that we can't lose track of. So it's really shouting from the rooftops what we're all doing on a daily basis. Starts there, but then also helping people understand how the system has to evolve as we're doing that.
Thank you. Allie and Habib, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, the whole public perception, and how do we gain their support?
I mean, I'll just add one quick statement, which is I agree with everything that Commissioner Sheehan just said. And at the Ray, we actually think that transportation saves the world. And we're not shy about saying that. So the general public believes that transportation is the source of all ills and delays and complaints. There's litter, there's emissions, there's traffic. Nothing good is associated with the transportation system by and large. And I don't mean to be overly harsh. It's just where all bad things start. And in reality, the view that we can create better outcomes with what we already have, with stewardship and leveraging what we already have to solve people's problems, is how transportation flips the script in the final chapter, and it saves the world. And in fact, if we could start showing that transportation is diversifying its funding streams, and it is securing and stabilizing its operations by pulling itself up with its own bootstraps, right? What an American story, right? Transportation actually solves its own funding problems. by starting to diversify its funding streams. And then as we move into a road usage charge or something like that. I think that we have to appeal to the public as we change perceptions. It's a necessity to get the public support and to get the leadership support behind these projects by convincing them that we can do better and that we have what we need to do better.
Habib, you all set on that? Or-
I'd say I agree with everything that's been said today. Shouting our success from the rooftops is really important right now. But also another opportunity is through education. We have an opportunity here to bring in middle school students and elementary school students and get them involved in transportation aspects and its impact and get them to do projects. And we do that. And Amanda right now, Collimore, I don't know if Amanda is right here. We're working with kids right now who come to the University of Maine and do competitions and so forth. So you really need to educate them from the very beginning about the importance of transportation, in addition to shouting today from the rooftops. But at the end of the day, also, it is really the political environment. It's going to take a long time to change public's mind. I think what we need to do is work with our leadership, political leadership, to try to get there as well. So.
Thank you. Questions from you? Yes, John.
So, oh, I really don't need this. Question for the commissioner. In your role as the AASHTO president, I'm sure you've interfaced with all of the 50 DOTs plus DC and all of the territories. Can you, in your opinion, state obviously it's a subjective thing, but which states are top 5 states that are more prone or dispositioned to work on and implement innovative technologies, materials, and products? And as a corollary to the rest of the panel, so I'm looking at 5, as going to the panel, knowing that durability is one of the components of this conference, how does the composites industry leverage describing durability as one of those selling points?
So it's so hard to pick 5 states that are innovators because it depends on the type of technology, who we really consider the leaders. So it was already mentioned, Utah for many years has been a leader. Why have they been on the bleeding edge when it comes to transportation technology and new materials and new delivery? Well, they're very fortunate they have a lot of state funding for transportation as well as federal funding. And the legal framework is such that they have some flexibility to try new things in a state like Utah. When I worked in Massachusetts, we used to joke about wanting to be the Utah of the East Coast, and especially when it came to accelerated bridge construction and use of composite technologies, we were trying to emulate through legislation first and foremost, but then through our programs, the work of a state like Utah. We are all preparing for electrification now and preparing for connected and automated vehicles. So as Allie said, when we think about connected technologies in particular, then it's the states like Michigan and Georgia that are leading on that front. So I do struggle to identify the 5 states that are truly on the cutting edge because it's so specific to which aspect of our work that they're leading on. I would say, how do we mainstream some of the technologies? I discussed that last night, and how do we take the lessons learned? There's a lot of opportunities within the state DOTs to share lessons learned. We're all stepping up and partnering, whether it's through organizations like the TIDC here, or whether it's through pool fund studies that we do in partnership with the Transportation Research Board or with other entities. But how do we break through and mainstream? That's what I was really focusing on last night. And I think it's going to really take the private sector working with us to better emphasize the benefits of technologies and materials. I talked about asset management and trying to have the dollars and cents that go with some of those images, an underfunded DOT being a wasteful DOT. If we had been able to spend a little bit more each year, we could have maximized the life expectancy of some of our assets. And so it's short-sighted to underfund in one budget cycle. But at the end of the day, new materials with better durability have lower life cycle costs, but we are still making tactical decisions today. We have to stretch the value of the dollar today. So, last night, Habib and I were talking about, we're very fortunate in New Hampshire DOT. I have some very talented folks in my pavement management section. They would love us to be using very different pavement treatments than the ones that we're selecting. But our limited funding is forcing us to stretch the value of the dollar. So instead of doing the right fix at the right time, occasionally we're compromising and to make sure that we're providing a better level of service for the customers who use our system, we're doing a lesser grade treatment, essentially roughness paving on some sections of highway, just to improve ride quality in the short term, because we have to stretch the value and impact as many users of the system as possible. So it's that constant balancing act between financially in the long run, what is the best decision, but in the short term, we have sections of roadway that are falling apart and people need a smoother ride, either because it's their daily trip and we are acutely aware that we impact quality of life with the work that we do, or you're not providing that good first impression for a state that is welcoming visitors throughout the year from a travel and tourism perspective. So there's a lot of the education that we have to do with the public is around the decision making that states are forced to exhibit because of the challenges around the current mix of funding. And when we do our 10-year planning process in New Hampshire, I spend a lot of time talking about the colors of money and trying to educate the public that this isn't about prioritizing all of the projects that we want to undertake. It's about prioritizing projects within categories, because each project is competing for a certain type of funding. And there's a lot of eligibility criteria that goes into project selection. There's so many facets of the work that we do that our industry doesn't understand, let alone the traveling public. And so we all need to tell that story, as I was saying earlier, to help people understand the why. And if they understand why we're making decisions, then they'll understand the outcomes that we're all striving for, but also the realistic outcomes that have really been a reflection of the lack of investment and the lack of public support for infrastructure.
Anyone else in the audience? Yes. This table is getting a bunch of stars here. They're asking all the questions. Yeah, the kids table.
Thank you. Ed Pilpel. I had a question for Allie. The map you showed of the grid along the highway, given the infrastructure bills, do you see a pathway that's possible to actually implement?
100%. The Manchin bill, the Fighting Inflation Act, specifically prioritizes rights of way for analysis and planning for new transmission and distribution. So we just saw the language again, which indicates that the White House and Congress are eyeing the right of way, which is good. The same week that federal highways memo was released in April of 21, Secretary Granholm announced a $5 billion program in the Loan Programs Office of DOE that places priority and special funding permission for rights of way and buried HVDC. So there's money and there are permissions over and over again from the Federal Highways Administration and from Congress. The other piece of this is just the energy sector moving forward. So, the rights of way are simply a land use solution. This is a land use solution to leverage the public's land, to stay out of court over eminent domain and land arguments, and to skirt public health concerns that always follow new T&D. So it is simply an accelerated solution for where to put the T&D. And we think it actually is going to save money on the projects themselves, because we think we can get maybe 50% faster through permitting and review. Federal Highways has indicated that there may be waivers around environmental reviews and environmental permitting. And if we can go from a 10-year review and permitting period to a 5-year period, we could save maybe $1 billion on some of these large projects. So time is money, delay is death, right? We're trying to get out of court with the land concerns. We remove the delay. We go quicker to projects, which is helpful globally on the climate crisis, but is helpful as the projects pencil out. And then you've got, the Midwestern Interconnect Transmission Operator, MISO, just approved the first tranche of new transmission projects as a result of their long-term transmission planning process. Where do those projects go? We got to work with Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan to get the tool, the analysis and planning tool in their hands to go quick to pairing, right? This is all about talked about last night at the 4th grade dance. The guys are on one wall and the girls are on the other wall. How do we dance in the middle? This is PUC and PSC dancing with DOT. It's rough stuff, right? It's awkward. But we got to figure out how to dance in the middle. And, there's opportunity with the states like New Hampshire and Maine that have already moved forward with energy corridor legislation. There's opportunities in Texas. Texas wants to, their right of way is open for business. There's opportunity wherever offshore wind goes. So the New England corridor plus Virginia plus Louisiana. There's opportunity in the Pacific Northwest with Oregon, Washington, dragging California along. So there's a lot of there. The thing is that unfortunately we have to sleep at night and there's only 7 days in a week and only 5 of those are designated as work days. And so what we have to figure out is how to move as quickly as possible with the most support around these solutions that present themselves so elegantly in the right of way. This is a land use solution and the energy guys are going to have to come along, but we should move forward with the DOTs opening up the right of way, setting the rules of engagement clearly so that the energy developers, the transmission developers can then walk into the land use solution.
We do have to wrap up. I know we're bumping against the end of our break, but I have one last question. And just real quick, each one of you, Habib, we'll start with you. We have innovation champions in the audience, in the virtual audience. What do you want to tell them? What do we need to do? What's our charge?
Brought a stick here to talk about the charge. This is an example of an innovation that's coming out in our lab today. Professor Roberto Lopez Anido and Bill Davids have worked on. This is a pultruded thermoplastic composite rebar, first time that's ever done successfully. And this rebar is lighter than steel. This rebar doesn't corrode, and you can heat it up and bend it on site to have bent rebars. Why do we have potholes in Maine or in other places? Because we use steel. Steel corrodes, expands inside concrete, and creates potholes. We can eliminate potholes with technologies like this. So the challenge is, all of us today, let's figure out how to make some demonstration projects throughout New England, okay, to try to use this technology as soon as we can. Any takers? The other thing I'd like to talk about is that, transmission is important to us, but one thing that transportation needs to do to make offshore wind work is not just transmission, it's port facilities. We are working on an offshore wind program right now in the state of Maine, and to put floating turbines bigger than the Washington Monument, 20 to 40 miles off the coast of Maine. The first one will go up hopefully in 2024 here in the state of Maine. These units have no place to go in terms of electricity, but there's no place to build them either. Okay, so we can build the transmission, but we still don't have a place to build the port facilities to deploy these units. And that's true throughout the United States. There's not enough port money available in Washington, DC to do that. So we need to invest in our ports to create the energy that's going to go into transmissions that Allie's talking about. So Allie, we'd love to work with you on that as well. So, and these ports aren't cheap. You're talking $200 to $300 million per port, 50 acres.
Allie, Commissioner, what's our charge?
I would just, hearken back to what University President Farini Mundy said last night about practical innovation. It folds right into what Commissioner Sheehan followed up with last night, which is how do we take innovation and integrate it into the system? How do we normalize? How do we fully embrace and metabolize innovation as the modus operandi of our system? How do we make it our MO? And so I think, the point is at the Ray anyway, is that number one, no bright, shiny objects. We try to stay very disciplined on our core program areas, which are innovative enough. It's innovative enough. You don't have to go out on the ledge. Just be innovative enough to be practical and define the ROI. That's what Ray Anderson did, and that's what we do every day. How do you define the ROI of innovation? Not as bright, shiny objects or building unicorns, but how do you build innovation, integrate it into a system, and be able to clearly articulate and define what is the ROI to the user, what's the ROI to the system, and what's the ROI to the system owner operator?
Commissioner, you get the last word.
So I'm not going to be repetitive. I was going to say what Allie said. It's, for those of you who are working on research projects or who have been able to pilot your technology, for the manufacturers and the fabricators who are scratching their heads as to why owners aren't just embracing their technology and using it. It's all about that return on investment and understanding the climate in which we're working. The legislative frameworks, the contractual requirements that we have to meet, and what those barriers might be to us saying yes when it comes to use of your technology. So that's what I was going to say, but I'm going to circle back to something that Habib said about motivating that next generation to want to work in the transportation field. We will not be successful without bright young people who bring fresh ideas to the table. And I talk about this a lot when I speak. I have a 4.5-year-old son. He is all about transportation, not because his mother is the commissioner of a state DOT, but because he loves trucks and trains and all things construction related. Why do we fall behind when it comes to attracting young people into the field of transportation and civil engineering in particular? We're doing all these exciting things. As state DOTs, we're not talking about just building roads and railways in the way that we did in the past. We truly are having these conversations with our counterparts across government. The role that we're going to play when it comes to electrification and using our right of ways, everything that Allie has touched on, that is what we at DOTs are living and breathing each and every day as we think about the future of transportation as well as managing the challenges that we face maintaining our existing system. So we need folks to understand the value, as I said before, that transportation plays in terms of giving you those opportunities to seek employment and get to your healthcare appointment, get to education, and excite them about working in our industry. We are not the DOTs of old. We are definitely trying to be more innovative. It might not feel like that to some of you in this room, but understanding what the barriers are and helping us lift those is one piece. The other piece is bringing in those young people who can truly help us make a difference.
Thank you. Let's thank the panel. Thank you very much. Commissioner, Allie, Habib, Amanda, we have time for a quick break, I'm assuming, because folks, and then we'll try to get started as soon as possible. Thank you. Oh, yeah, we have food and drinks over here on the left. So thank you again.